Hi all, in this lab, let us understand how to integrate S3 buckets with REST API. Okay, so what we will be doing is we will create an S3 bucket and perform various operations in that S3 bucket. For example, we will create an object. Okay, that means we will create a file, then using a put method, and we will get the file and we will also delete that file. Okay, so let us look at the architecture. So we have one REST API called S3 Integration API, uptype regional endpoint, and the top resource, which is slash, will have one method, which is get. Okay, and this operates on the S3 bucket itself. Whereas the other method, which is slash file name, okay, this will operate on the various objects. You can get an object, put an object, delete an object. Okay, now all of these API gateway operations will connect to the S3 bucket. Okay. Now when the client sends a request and he provides a file name and also the corresponding text, right, to be part of that file, then the request will go to the API gateway, and there is no change here with respect to the request. It will be sent as it is. Then the S3 operations will complete and then the response will come. Okay, so if you are creating a bucket object using the put method, the response is nil. Okay, you're just updating the S3 with a object. But if you are doing get operation, then you will get the object data. Okay, that's a file data. So that's how the response will be. Now let's go to the source code and see how to implement this in Terraform. Okay. Hi all, in this lab, let us understand how to implement S3 integration with API Gateway. Okay, so we will create a sample REST API and integrate that with an S3 bucket and do some operations like put an object, get an object and delete an object. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so let us go to the main code. Here we are creating a REST API with the name S3 integration API and the endpoint type is regional. Okay, and the specification for this API is coming from the open API spec, which is from this file. Okay, now if I open this file, let us look at the definition. Here in the top level, we are creating one method get. Okay, and we are creating some responses 400, 500 and 200, and the type of the response is application slash JSON file. Okay, so JSON schema, and the empty schema is what we are using for the default response. Now, for the API gateway integration, we are using the credentials, which is an IAM role, which API gateway will use to access S3. And HTTP method is get, and the URI is where we are configuring the S3 URI backend basically. So this is the path, and here this is the bucket name. Okay, and the responses we are configuring for 400, and the default is 200, and for 500 also 501, 502. Those responses we are just sending the status code as 500. Okay, and the type of the integration is AWS. And for one more resource called slash file name, so this is where we have to provide the input to the API to create a S3 object, to get an S3 object, delete an object. So this is object name basically, it's a file name. So we can do get operations. So in the get operations, we have to provide file name, and the responses configuration is here, and this is integration. So we are again using the HTTP method get, and so here we are providing the bucket name slash the key. Okay, so this is the configuration for S3, and the responses are 401, 402. Similarly, we have default response and 5xx response we are configuring, and the integration type is AWS. The same thing applies for put also. So in the case of put, again we are providing the file name, the responses configuration. In the integration type, we are providing HTTP method as put, and the bucket name slash the key, and the responses are same as earlier. For delete also, we have to provide the file name. Response configuration is also more or less same. The integration type, it's a delete method, and bucket name slash the object name, and the response configuration is same. So here we are providing a request parameter. So the file name which we are providing as an input in the path, it is assigned to the key. Okay, the key is one of the parameter. Okay, so and the integration type is AWS, which is a AWS service integration, right? Now let's go ahead and deploy this. So before we deploy, let's also look at the remaining configuration uh, for the API gateway. Okay, so we have an S3 bucket which we need to create to store the objects, okay, for this demo. And apart from that, for the API gateway configuration, we are just creating some method settings and also creating a stage and deployment. Okay, so let us do Terraform init. Let's do Terraform plan and Terraform auto apply. Okay, so we have the output from the Terraform apply. Now let us go to the console and check how the resources are created. Okay, so this is our API of type REST API. So this is REST API and regional endpoint. And on the top level path, we have one get method. So this is the AWS integration. So if you look at the edit configuration, we can see that S3 is integrated and it's a get method, and this is a path. This is the object, S3 object name. Okay. Now, if I go further, the slash file name is another resource. So this is having three methods: delete, get, and put. So if I look at get method, for example, so integration type is AWS. We have to provide one path, which is key, and it is coming from the file name. So file name is the parameter that we have to provide, and that value will be assigned to key. Okay. Now, if you go to the edit configuration for this method, so you will see get method, and this is the key value which will be used as the object name, and this is the role that we have created to access S3. Okay. Now for integration responses, we have three responses: default 200, 4xx, and 5xx. Okay, so these three responses, and method responses also we have three. Okay, and we can go ahead and test it. So similarly for the put also, the configuration is same. Okay, so if I go to edit, so here we have to provide the object name using the key parameter, and integration is also having three responses. Method is also configured three. Similarly, the get delete also is same. So you can see the same configuration for delete also. Okay. Now let us go ahead and test this. Okay. So here what we will do is let us say sample file. Okay. Uh, File test. Let's say one dot text. Okay. Sample file test dot text, and this is a sample file. Okay. Now if we do put if we click on the put, right, so I mean test button, so you'll see that the response is 200, and there's no data because we are not returning anything. We are just putting a message object into the S3, right? Now if you go to the S3 bucket, okay, this is the S3 bucket, and here let us just refresh this. So we see sample file test one dot text, right? So this is what we have created just now. Okay, now let us try, you know um, get method. So in the get operation, so we will just say sample file test 2.x instead of 1.x. I'll put 2.x. Okay, just to check whether this will work or not, right? So it provides 400 error because this file does not exist, right? The specified key does not exist. So I'll just change this to 1.txt, and you see that the response is 200, and there is a sample file. This is what we have inputted right into the file. So that means put and get are working. Similarly, we can just delete also. So what we can do now is we will go to the console and CLI and test it. So for that we need to go to the stage and get the URL. So for example, if I wanted to put or get, so this is the URL. So let's go to the CLI command and test it. So first we need to get the URI for the API. Okay. So this is the URI. Now here I will say sample 4. Okay. Just for testing purpose. So that means it is working. So there is no response. So let's go to the console and go to the S3 bucket, and sample 4 is created, right? Now I will do a get operation with the same file name, and it should return the data that we have just entered, right? So this concludes the test that we are able to integrate S3 bucket with API Gateway REST API and perform various object operations, like creating, deleting, and getting those objects.